Hey everyone and welcome. This is Luke Givens.
And this is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
And you were listening to Colonized Minds podcast. Welcome everyone. This is actually, so this is going to be our first podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. So just to kind of let you all know how the podcast game works, we have recorded a few podcasts
ahead
of time. And we are actually putting this one out first. So we figured we'd get the kinks out.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So for those folks who may not be familiar with podcasts or the Multicultural Center, really the idea behind us even starting the Colonized Minds podcast was the Multicultural Center is kind of a place where we have a lot of really in-depth conversations. And there's a lot of ideas that really get started and originated here in the Multicultural Center that then get kind of implemented on campus and throughout the district.
Right.
And I don't think I don't think we get credit for that. I don't think a lot of people really understand kind of the role the Multicultural Center has or plays in really fostering a lot of these ideas, right? Whether it just be open conversations that we're having or conversations in my office or directly with Elizabeth or Dr. Johnson. But really, this is kind of like, I think, a breeding ground for really, really great ideas. And so the idea was, how do we take these conversations and we put them out, right? So that everyone can have the opportunity to hear these conversations. And they don't necessarily have to come to the Multicultural Center to do it.
And you make a good point there that normally folks have access to these conversations, but only if they're within our office suites, not necessarily living their daily lives as students, faculty, staff, community members. So being able to share these conversations and these ideas with everyone is, a pretty good idea, I think.
Yeah. And we're being presumptuous. So, introduction again. I'm Luke Givens. I'm the coordinator for the Cascade Multicultural Center.
And I'm Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo, title to be determined.
TBD. But yeah, so we're the full-time staff that work in the Multicultural Center. We also have a number of other folks who work in the Multicultural Center as well. We have our student advocates. They're actually going to be on one of our podcasts. Dr. Lorna Tran, who coordinates our LSANT program, which is the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. It's a joint collaboration between PCC and PSU that helps transition STEM students, students who are studying STEM fields, to Portland State University. And then we also have Dr. Johnson, who, by the time you all are hearing this, Dr. Johnson would have left us. He's accepted a new title as the director for the Trio Roots program. So we miss Dr. J.
He's moving up in the world.
He is leaving us behind. Yeah. So yeah, part of the idea behind this is just being able to have conversations about race, ethnicity, culture, inclusion, all those different types of things that kind of make the Multicultural Center what it is. We do some talking about politics, although that's a much more delicate dance we've got to tread.
Public employees here.
Exactly, public employees. But we really talk about a little bit of everything, I would say. The other cool thing that we do, and you all will be seeing this in the weeks to come, is that we interview folks from around the PCC community, just about them, who they are, but then also how they are able to infuse equity and inclusion work into the work that they're doing. And that's one of the things I think that's most important about this podcast is that so often this type of work is seen as like this addition. It's not really seen as a part of what we should all be doing. And so there's this idea that I do my work and that's this extra thing. And our purpose behind having these interviews is really to show people that no matter what it is that you're doing, there's a way that you could be doing this through kind of an equity and inclusion lens.
So I think we've made actually a couple of assumptions here.
We have. I always make assumptions.
One of them being like, what is it that we do as a multicultural center? And I feel like people actually have that question pretty often.
Let's talk about that, because that is an assumption that a lot of people make. And we were just having this conversation a little bit earlier about this. So where does that come from? Why do we make that assumption?
We have these conversations about like if we were in the field of neuroscience,
yes,
for example, folks wouldn't necessarily assume that everyone knows what a neuroscientist does, because not everyone knows what a neuroscientist does. Neuroscientists have gone through great lengths to study what they do, research what they do, and practice what they do.
And there's an openness
for
the neuroscientists to explain what it is that they do.
Right, exactly. Yes. But then when you talk about topics that that involve society as a whole, which is a lot of the work that we do here as a center, folks tend to assume that they have the knowledge base, or that's because they are part of the society, are able to explain exactly what is going on, but not really understanding the theory behind everything, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
It makes sense to me. It may not make sense to our listeners,
right.
But it makes sense to me.
So anyway, today, or not today, but we often have folks that will come into the center with preconceived notions, or randomly in meetings or wherever we might be, that recognize that we're from the Multicultural Center, and have just like preconceived notions. And honestly, they're innocent preconceived notions, but they are preconceived notions of what it is that we do.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're not actually accurate notions of what it is that we do. Or it might just be one component of what it is that we do.
Yeah.
So for folks to know what we actually do, I think it's important to address that question.
Yeah, I think so. I'll speak to like even when the Multicultural Center first got started. So for those who don't know, the Multicultural Center wasn't even open. This actual space, we moved into this space, or we opened officially. I want to say it was January 5th of 2015. So if you can do your math on that one, that's not a long time, right? And before the time, Cascade didn't even have a Multicultural Center. But I remember I got hired in October of 2014 to kind of do the legwork, the groundwork to get this place kind of up and running. And I would have so many conversations with people who would approach me and tell me what the Multicultural Center was supposed to be doing. Right. And it was really interesting because these are people who had never worked, a lot of times had never worked with the Multicultural Center before, or had this very kind of, there's no nice way to say it, kind of an outdated idea of what a Multicultural Center is. But we're trying to kind of give, I guess, guidance or advice for what we should be doing. And so I think one of the things that was important, at least that we tried to do very early on, or not that it was important, but we spent a lot of time kind of saying what we didn't do, right? And so we would explain what we did, but it was really important for us to kind of explain what we didn't do. And I think a lot of those assumptions kind of come from people who maybe have had some interaction with like a multicultural center at another campus or at another college or institution that they've been to, or they just hear the term multicultural and they allow themselves to kind of define what that means.
Right. And oftentimes that comes from like personal experiences.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say it's an innocent assumption.
Yes.
Because it does come from personal experiences. But those personal experiences oftentimes can be like celebratory events, like attending a Cinco de Mayo festival, or a powwow, or I don't know, some sort of other like cultural events where you're really not necessarily learning about the culture, you're more consuming it. Yeah. So putting that connotation as to what we do as a center oftentimes is the first response that we get.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify, there's no knock on being able to do that. I think it's those types of things, depending on like where you're at, I think are important to have an understanding of like customs and traditions that different people have. The issue, I think, with that is that it's a very kind of safe way of experiencing different cultures. And oftentimes what then ends up happening is that culture or that group is somehow defined by those, what I would consider like a consumable.
Right.
So now everything about that group can be wrapped up in this one event. And then it becomes this thing where you go to these events to experience and quote unquote learn. Mm-hmm. But there's this whole other story. I'd equate it to this. It would be like someone going to like a Christmas party and assuming they know everything about American culture based on going to a Christmas party, right? And how misguided would that be? I'm not even saying like Christianity. I'm saying like American culture. It's like going to a Christmas party and assuming that that's what it is.
Right.
Like that's a facet. Like it's something that some people within a culture do. But to use that as some overarching definition of what, American culture is would be a little misguided.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what do we do?
What do we do? So part of that is the rationale behind doing the podcast. We're doing the podcast to talk about some of the things that we do, although we've just spent like probably a good 10 minutes talking about the stuff that we don't
15,
do.
right.
Probably at least 15.
And even just like hit service at that point.
Yeah.
So kind of how I like to explain, honestly, when I like talk with people outside of PCC and they ask what I do, I never actually say, well, depending on who they are, but most of the times I don't actually say that I work for a multicultural center on college campuses, because they also have that preconceived notion of what we do. So I have started to say that I work within equity and inclusion on college campuses. And then folks are able to relate more to what we actually do, as opposed to what's the preconceived notion of what we do.
And you're better than me, because typically I don't even tell people what I do. No, I got this idea from I can't even remember his name now, but he runs this blog called Angry Asian Man, and he says that whenever he travels a lot, and he says whenever he's on planes and people ask him what he does, like he tells people like he's a like software engineer, or he's like a computer engineer, something like that. Basically, he says this thing to like get people to not ask him any further questions, because if he starts telling people what he does, people will just begin to like ask him all these questions he doesn't want to answer. So I kind of do the same thing. I usually will try to give someone like a diversion. I was like, oh, yeah, I work at college.
And it's actually interesting that you bring that up, of like having to answer all these questions. And also the way that those questions are phrased, and even the body language that those questions are asked with. Like oftentimes when we're answering questions as to what it is that we do, if folks already have a preconceived notion of what we do and our responses aren't in line with that preconceived notion, their stance almost takes on this like accusatory tone of where you don't do what you're supposed to be doing. And then us having to like really in-depthly explain what it is that we do, why do we do what we do, and what outcomes do like our actions derive for our campus community. So it's like having to validate even our existence and the work that we do on campus.
And the only thing that I'm trying to do is just enjoy my friend's housewarming party. I'm just coming to bring my friend a gift at a housewarming party, and now all of a sudden I have to explain what it is that I'm doing so that you can understand it. So I mean that's part of the drawback to the work and this is another thing. It's very hard to turn it off, right? We don't get to just kind of compartmentalize things. When we kind of say, hey, we do equity and inclusion work, or we work in a multicultural center, it very much opens up the door to these conversations that, you don't always feel like having.
And even with that, like having an equity and inclusion lens, you can't ever really turn that lens off. So even, like I was having a conversation with you, Luke, earlier about my grocery trip shopping this past weekend. And like the realization of just like everyday forms of oppression that exist in society. Two of the examples that I gave was I was grocery shopping with my partner this weekend at a location here in Portland.
We won't say which one.
And, we were picking out, fragrances for, what are they called? Air fresheners?
The little oil scenty things.
Yeah, the plug-in air fresheners. Like just picking out fragrances.
Just normal, everyday errands.
Exactly. Like really boring errands too. And then all of a sudden, two fellas walk, right by us and walk right by us again, turn around, walk right by us again, and are making this comments about there being a bunch of piñatas, in Portland now. Well, obviously that's a pretty racist comment, seeing as, they made the assumption of me being a foreigner, or an immigrant or whatever you want to call it, and not necessarily belonging here.
Yeah, there's also a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? White supremacists in Portland. I don't know if you've picked that up, but yes, there's also seems to be an uptick on them recently.
So it's almost bringing even that topic of like what is essentially causing that to happen. Like folks to feel more comfortable to being racist, overtly racist.
Yeah, there is definitely there's definitely like an uptick on that, and I think a change in that has become like there was, I don't know, like a few years ago, it was like really uncool to be racist. Like the worst thing you could say someone was like a racist, and it was just like, oh my god, like seriously, you're racist. Now it's kind of become like in certain spheres like kind of okay to be like a little racist. Yeah. Like, to kind of go to what you were saying, like, I was in a grocery store recently. I won't say which one. And
two separate grocery stores, by the way.
Two separate grocery stores. And like a skinhead walked right by me. So as I'm going out, he's walking in. And no, it's not the first time in my life I've seen a skinhead. I've seen a few. But it was really interesting because that's not something that you expect to see in kind of like liberal, progressive Portland, is for people to be like knowingly and openly expressing kind of like white supremacist ideology.
Right.
But that is something that you see a lot more now. Like, there's the overt, but then there's that other category of folks who like, they won't necessarily get the tattoos, wear the shirts, and switch to suspenders or shoelaces, but they'll say things that really support that same type of ideology.
Right. Or do things.
Yeah.
One of my other experiences over the last several weeks, and to give some context to like the stories that I'm sharing, is I'm in a partnership that's a biracial partnership. And so the other experiences that I've had over the last couple of weeks is that when me and my partner go out to restaurants, literally the last 3 times that we've gone out to just like a date night dinner, we get put on like this corner table that's essentially like blocked off from the actual like ambiance of the room, or everything that going on around the restaurant, and just secluded in this like dark corner, really.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have to ask myself, like, what, if it happens 3 times in a row, is it just a coincidence, or is something deeper going on there?
It is strange, though, that like that's even a question that you have to ask.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's people who will go like, who are listening to this right now, and will go, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Like, have you thought about such and such? And that's something that I also find like quite often is like these types of things happen. There's this aspect of like, oh man, like now I gotta think about like why this happened and try to give this person the benefit of the doubt. And then when you try to like explain that to other people, they want to attempt to like explain it away, as opposed to just being empathic.
But it happens so often that like, honestly, it's a question. Like, I still question whether, because I want to give the benefit of the doubt. But really, like, if it happens so often, that benefit of the doubt really goes out the window.
And that's another thing too, is like the whole like giving folks the benefit of the doubt. I think there's this like, I know you've heard this term like the social justice warrior, right? And there's this idea that like people who do this type of work like want to be like the diversity police. It's like, no, it's not necessarily that. I don't want to be the diversity police.
And like giving the benefit of that even like explains that, like, I don't want to assume that I'm being discriminated upon.
But if this has happened the last 3 times that I've been to a restaurant, I got to start to think like, well, is there a pattern here? Like,
right, exactly. And it's not even like just outside in the community. I've actually experienced the same stuff here on campus.
No.
I know, right? Shocking. Oftentimes we think that like this sort of stuff isn't happening at Cascade campus, but it is. Just the other week, I was having, my partner came to visit for lunch. Yeah. My partner came to visit for lunch, and, we were sitting down chatting, having a sandwich, and she had just gotten off work, and, she works in a medical field, so she was wearing scrubs and a sweater. And here I was.
And this is like, important to know what she was wearing.
Right, exactly. She was wearing scrubs and a sweater with her hair, up in a bun and stuff. And I was wearing, like a Portofino shirt, and I think I was wearing a blazer that day, and like black pants and stuff.
Kind of professional,
like
right?
A professional attire,
right?
Yeah. So we were sitting down. A fella walks in and starts like having a conversation with us about a request that the fellow was making. Mm-hmm. And by us, I really mean that fellow was having a conversation with my partner, not with me.
Yes.
So the entire time that fellow was having, speaking, yes, that eye contact was completely directed at my partner. Every 20 seconds or so, they'd glance at me and immediately turn right back to my partner, assuming that she was, the professional, at the center, that she was the one working here.
Yes, with scrubs on.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Never, ever did it come into mind that I could have been the person that worked here.
Yeah, in the Multicultural Center.
Right, yes. Exactly. So then finally, when the fellow was done talking, I said, hey, I'm actually the one that works here. And then it was almost like a shock. Literally, he like stepped back.
It's funny because like it's almost like people don't realize that you can see them. So it's like this involuntary reaction,
right?
That like that happens, and it's like, oh yeah, like I can see you,
right?
You're surprised,
exactly. And so then my presence was actually acknowledged, and then essentially he retold me the entire conversation that I just heard.
Didn't just see him, yes.
And then I said finally, like, yeah, we could help, we can help advertise for the events that was happening, because I thought it was a good event for our students. But like even having to have that interaction, like at the place that I work, doing the type of work that I do, and still this occurring like on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think that's like the big thing. It's not necessarily about like we do give people the benefit of the doubt, and a lot of it is not necessarily like this maliciousness. It's not necessarily about people just being jerks. Mind you, there are jerks out there, and we know them, but it's not even necessarily about that. I think we understand, like we kind of grow up in a society where like we have these assumptions, and we'll do and we say things and we don't necessarily think about them. I think the other part of that is that there has to be an openness, right? Kind of like we were talking about earlier, like there has to be an openness to learn. And I think that's the thing that I find most troubling, especially like now in like this climate, is that there isn't this openness to learn. Like one of the things I try to pride myself on is I can be very opinionated. My partner even says that I'm slightly judgmental. I'll wear that. But I also, on the same token, like I attempt to be open, and I allow myself to learn. So, if I say something and it's stupid, and I often will say stupid things, like I'm okay with being told that you shouldn't say that, or this is why that might be problematic. And I feel like now, like we kind of have this climate where, like, if you question something about someone, or you try to give that kind of helpful advice on how to
feedback.
Yeah, just feedback. You're a social justice warrior. You're wanting to limit free speech, like all of these different things. And it's like, no, it's just I don't intentionally want to be a jerk. So if I say something that's problematic, give me feedback and let me know that that's the case. I'm going to take that. I'm going to evaluate it. I'm either going to say, like, that's good constructive feedback. I'm going to work on it. Or like, that's your opinion. I'm still going to continue to say this. But the idea that I'm going to attack you or judge you or demean you for trying to give me honest feedback, I think is problematic.
And then on the other side, like, it isn't necessarily being a social justice warrior or whatever, you want to term it. Yeah. It's just like wanting to be treated with like simple human dignity and respect, like wanting to be acknowledged that presence is there. Yeah. Not necessarily like, oh, you have to correct, your language or everything that you say or everything that you think or whatever the case may be. No, just show me the same respect you're showing my partner.
Yeah, and if like, and I think that's like a huge thing now. I mean, because we're kind of talking about microaggressions, although we're not getting into the specifics. We haven't named it. It's not microaggressions, but I think a lot of it is that, like, I think there was like a space and there was a time where like you could say things and people just wouldn't, like, people weren't confrontational, so people just didn't. They just wore it, right? So you could say something that was problematic or offensive, and that person just kind of had to sit there and take it, or they just did. And I guess the pushback to that is, we're kind of at a point where I don't want you to continue to do that, right?
Right.
So, like, in my case, if I'm saying something that could be offensive, or that could just genuinely from like one human being to another human being, like what I'm saying could very much hurt you. I don't necessarily want to do that. Let me know, and then I can correct that behavior, or I can try to be a better person.
Right.
But this idea that like you're wrong or that you're bad for trying to communicate to someone that what they're saying is helpful, like now we revert back to you kind of being a jerk. So, and ultimately, I mean, that's what it is. It's not about like limiting free speech. It's not about being warriors. It's about like I'm attempting to give you the tools that are needed to help connect with another human being on like a much more personal, deeper level. If you're pushing back against that, man, there's something up. And I'm also saying in reverse, I'm looking for the same type of feedback, those same types of tools, because, as arrogant as I can be sometimes, I do genuinely want to be able to connect with people on like a deeper, like emotional level.
So we should probably get back to that question of like what it is that we actually
I know,
do.
I was going to, so we're on the same
Right.
page there. You know, what do we do?
It's more like looking at our structure and what type of system we function as a college, and where are there disparities in that system where like minoritized groups are, you know, are being discriminated upon, have additional barriers to access, or different things. Like, where are those pitfalls within our structure, and how do we change that so that it is really inclusive for everyone?
Yeah.
And so by that I mean is like we look at our structure, we look at our policies, at our practices, and figure out like where are areas that we could improve upon.
Yeah. One of the ways I try to describe it to people as well is that it really is kind of about campus climate work, like kind of overarching, large-scale campus climate work, and saying that let's speak in definitive terms, like let's facts. And I can say facts because I've been doing this work for a little while. I see students literally every day. There's students who come on campus and don't necessarily feel like they're completely included or part of this institution. And that's the case here. That is the case at every college and university I've ever been to. There is a group of students, right? And sometimes that group is larger than others who don't feel like they're fully integrated. And part of the reason that they don't feel fully integrated is because when this whole dynamic or this whole structure of higher ed was created, they were kind of an afterthought. Right? It wasn't really created for them.
It wasn't even an afterthought.
Yeah.
It was just something that happened, and now they had to address.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. So,
I'm taking it away.
Yeah. But so the idea is, so the reality is that you got students here, and I'll also add faculty and staff members who don't feel like they're 100% a part of this. And in many ways, I can say, feel like the environment is hostile.
Yeah. And
so I really see part of our work is figuring out how do we make that a more inclusive environment so that that environment is not even that it's not hostile anymore, but that this genuinely is a place for those individuals to thrive, and they feel like this is their place as well. And so that's done through educational opportunities. So there are events and things that we do, programs, workshops, trainings, and it really is meant as a way of kind of lifting the overall consciousness of people. But there's also work that we're doing with faculty and with staff members on how to become much more, I don't even want to say competent, but relevant in the work that they're doing with one-on-one with students. And then there's that administrative piece. So kind of as you were saying is, how are we operating in a way, or the policies that we have that are contributing to those feelings of otherness experienced by students, so those feelings of hostility that are experienced by students and faculty and staff members. So it's kind of one of the ways I really like to look at it. I think oftentimes I've been in meetings and I felt like is that our job is to teach students how to deal with the racism that they experience, right? So
from the deficit model.
Yeah, it's very much a deficit model. Like, no, what we do is perfect, right? We just need to take these poor little black and brown kids and teach them how to
navigate the
system. There you go.
Perfect system we created.
Exactly, because the system itself is perfect. And I think our thought is this, like using that model is like, collecting water with a bucket that has a hole in it. Like you're only going to be so effective in being able to do that. So we have to do this work with faculty and staff. We have to do this work with administration in addition to the work that we're doing with students. Because if we can do that work with faculty and staff members, now our students are coming into an environment and coming into a climate that's supportive of them, supportive of their needs. The students, they cycle out, right? And they cycle out fairly frequently if you look at it from a long-term perspective, right? And so really being able to do that work on the student end, but also with faculty, staff, and administrators, you're doing work with people who have a vested interest in this place and who are going to be here for a longer period of time. Yep. And that's really, there has to be work that's addressed there.
Right, exactly. So that's a short answer.
That's a short answer. And then we get into specifics. I mean, like we have leadership programs that we work with. I also think it's important that we talk about kind of the leadership programs that we have. We have our African American Scholars Program, we have a Men of Color Program. We also have our Equity and Diversity Advocates. And one of the ways that I like to explain kind of the necessity behind the leadership programs is a lot of the work that we do is helping students understand the world that they are going to go into.
Right. Yeah.
But then doing that with the ability to create the type of world that they want.
Right, exactly.
And I think oftentimes,
in a sense, not necessarily only being aware of what are some of the things that they'll have to deal with, right, in society or in the different institutions that they're a part of, but also how do you create a change that will better create an institution to address everyone's needs.
Yeah, I think oftentimes in places that I've been, there's kind of like a focus on one or the other.
Right.
Like it's either like we gas students up and like we give them all these like tools and strategies and it's like go out and change the world, but it's from this very kind of top down approach.
Right.
It's almost like we give students the tools to go out and work in an environment where they're going to be the CEO, but they're entry level.
Right.
So it's like the tools and strategies that we give them would work if they own their own business or if they came in as a CEO. But the truth is, like, they're coming in a lot of times at an entry level. So how do you help a student or how do you prep a student to say, yeah, you're going to come in at an entry level position? How do you exercise leadership from that position? And it's not necessarily like completely overthrowing how things are done, but is there a way or space that you can carve out within that institution where you can create the type of environment for yourself, for your team around you, that you want to experience?
Right.
So that's the way I like to explain our student leadership. But we also do other stuff as well.
We do other stuff, yeah. Some of the other stuff, like we have an ongoing partnership with the community-based learning departments at PCC, which is actually a district department. And essentially what they do is they create partnerships between like community organizations and PCC, specifically collaborations between courses and community organizations. So to be able to have experiential learning opportunities built within the course. So now our role with community-based learning. So our collaboration with CBL is now more of a direct to students as opposed to classroom to, community organization, direct to students and organization. And how do we create those links there? So we have an event actually coming up, and it's this Wednesday.
All right.
So it's called Neighbor to Neighbor. And we're having 23 community organizations here on campus at the quad, which is between the Student Union building and Cascade Hall. And essentially, they'll be there from 11 to 2 p.m. to be able to, interact with our students, but also our faculty, our staff, other community members to see what resources are available and what engagement opportunities are available. And to be able to kind of get a sense of what community are we in? Who's around us? Because it's not just PCC.
Yeah, we are a community college.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other thing that we're doing on Wednesday as well, I think it's also on Wednesday, is Lemonade.
Right, Wednesday and Thursday.
Wednesday and Thursday. So we have the Lemonade stand. So not like Beyonce's Lemonade, but more like that, when life gives you lemons,
make lemonade.
So not necessarily like we want people to come to us with their problems, but I would say like more like, I would say like suggestions.
Kind of like what we're looking for is to kind of hear about what different experiences have students, staff, faculty, or community members that interact with PCC. What kind of experiences does everyone have on campus? And then that way, are we able to see, trends and the feedback that we're receiving? So, for example, like, is there discrimination that is happening on campus, besides like what Luke and I have shared on the podcast? Like what else is going on? And is there a trend that we're seeing? And how do we address that as a college campus?
Yeah. And mind you, this isn't something, I also think it's important to note, this isn't something that Elizabeth or I came up with. This was our students actually who came up with this idea. And so the lemonade stand is going to be Wednesday and Thursday. And where are we going to be hosting it?
It's in the quad between Student Union Building, Cascade Hall from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And so they will have lemonade.
Yes. You don't have to actually bring, like, not to be literal, you don't have to bring us actual lemons.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
No, we'll be handing out free lemonade in exchange for some piece of information.
Gotcha, yeah.
So they'll have, little survey slips for folks to fill out, or you can also have one-on-one conversations with our students or ourselves as well. And again, just trying to get a better idea of what the experiences of folks on campus are.
What are some other stuff that we're doing this time?
So in line with these podcasts, I guess I'll put a plug in right now.
Let's go ahead and put them in.
In line with these podcasts, we are having a live podcast on election night.
Yes.
Essentially to talk about the election.
Yes.
So we're going to be reserving a space here on campus where folks will be able to be part of the live audience.
Yeah.
And hear the podcast being recorded live. We'll also have a social media feed where folks will be able to submit questions to be asked during the podcast. And, being able to see that both online and in person as the elections are going on.
Yeah, and we're actually, for that, we're going to work with some of our friends down with ASPCC, their Ledge team. Shout out to Ashley. And actually, we're going to try to have Ashley on the show. So Ashley McKinney, I believe is Ashley's last name. So she is the Director of Legislative Affairs this year. They're actually in a process right now where they're trying to get folks registered to vote. They're doing the Vote or Vote campaign right now. So we're actually going to try to get Ashley on next week so she can kind of talk about some of the work that they're doing. So yeah, we're going to be doing that live election podcast in conjunction with ASPCC's Ledge team. I think it's going to be a pretty good look. I think it's going to be fun.
So yeah, so that's one thing to look forward to this term.
Yeah. And then at some point, I don't know if we're going to talk about this yet, but we got to get our videos going.
Right. And so I Need 5, essentially it's a vlog. And for those of you that don't know what a vlog is.
Vlog with a V.
Yeah.
As in victory.
Vlog with a V. So essentially it's a video. It's a video blog. And I will be the one hosting that video blog. But essentially, we're going to be talking again about just different social justice type issues, particularly in relation to higher education. And talking, giving some data and some theory behind what the topics involve. So one of the topics will be like going more in depth to what a multicultural center does, or how, more specifically, how the purpose of multicultural centers have transitioned and changed over the recent decades.
I think that's important.
To where we are today. So that's just one of the topics. Another one of the topics would be like gentrification here around our community. That's a really prevalent, topic occurring right now. We can literally see the change happening around us. I come to work and I see houses being torn down and then 4 townhouses being built in place of 1.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like I remember, so I walk to work every day. Well, I take that back. I'm lying. I don't walk every day. When I'm trying to be good, I walk. When I'm lazy, I drive. But I'm within walking distance. And I can remember, actually, on my route, every day, I would see this house. House gets torn down, and then they're starting to build. And I remember walking by, and I guess, I don't know if it was a developer, contractor, who it was, but I remember, like, as I'm walking by, kind of nod, like, hey, how's it going? Pretty well. And I just go, like, 1 or 2, like, as in the number of houses. They just tore down 1. So are you putting up 1 new house? Or are you putting up 2? And he goes, 4. And I'm just like, man, like, I'm pretty sure that you're not putting up 4 houses at the same price of the one that you tore down.
Right.
Like, so I don't know. Like, I think it's a very, very big thing, especially for Cascade.
Yeah.
And I think, Rock Creek has its own thing. So does Sylvania and Southeast, and I think gentrification is affecting probably all of those campuses to some degree.
But
whether
the same magnitude as Cascade.
No.
It's just no.
And it's affecting it differently. I mean, it could have an issue on enrollment. It has an issue on the types of students that are going there. But I think because this is very much a campus that is ingrained in the community, we literally are a part of the community. There's no buffer. There's no barrier there. We really do get to see kind of the face-to-face upfront effects of gentrification.
And the thing is that a lot of our students really like coming to this campus.
They do.
But now they're being forced to move to remote areas of Portland or Gresham or whatever the case may be, and now having to commute to campus every day, and it just being a huge ordeal, because when it used to be a walk distance, now it's an hour and a half bus ride or bike ride.
And that's real. I mean, there's people who complain about having to drive from Southwest or having to drive from Hill. Like, we have students who were traveling from Vancouver on the bus to come to Cascade. So one, I mean, that shows you just how much they really love taking classes here at Cascade. But it also says something very powerful about these students being displaced. So
there's that, and then there's housing insecurity. So because prices around the area are skyrocketing up, our students are not being able to either renew their leases or continue on to their month-to-month situations, and then having to jump from place to place, and that being a constant stress factor of, well, I don't know where I'm going to live.
Yeah.
So how could your education be more important than knowing where you're going to live the next day?
And that's really important. I mean, and it's not important just from kind of like this moral standpoint. I think oftentimes like we feel like your number one priority is that of a student, and what we know in doing this is that's like being a student is like on the list of
it's
5 or 6 on that list, and it is that. So it's like if I'm like I'll tell a story. I would have students who literally would be sleeping in tents out in the middle of the woods. I had one particular student who would he would have to take public transit out to Scappoose. And he had a little place, it was a clearing in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and he was sleeping in a tent. Obviously, he's not getting the best sleep. And so he would actually take naps in the center itself. We had like a little spot where he would take naps, or he would sleep on the on our couch. Mm-hmm. What type of effect do you think that's going to have on his ability to concentrate when he's in class? Right. And it's not like, oh, that's the only student I had like that. Like, we've had plenty of students who have tons. Exactly. And so I think we're not saying this necessarily as like this idea of like a sob story, but I think it's
important to realize like the stories and the experiences of our students to be able to better meet their needs.
Absolutely.
You know, and making, you made a good point, making that realization that oftentimes for our students, education isn't the number one priority because, like, honestly, basic needs are the number one priority.
And there's also a realization of like sometimes, and this is kind of a pushback that, you know, I'll sometimes get when I try to share these stories and talk about them. It's just like, well, we'll go handle those things and then come back when you can be a student. It's like, well, life isn't perfect like that. Life doesn't always work in that way. And part of people are attempting to use education as a tool to get themselves out of that situation, right? And so they have to be able to navigate both of those things. They got to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? But yeah, I think it's important for us, all of us, whether it's faculty, staff, administrators, like whoever it is. I think it's important for us to kind of acknowledge that that's how our students are coming to us. They're not coming to us perfect. They're coming to us with real life situations, and as an institution, our ability to address those things and to assist with those things as much as we can, it increases our bottom line. It increases the number of students who are going to be able to graduate, who are going to be able to transfer, who are going to be able to get great job placement. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at these things as kind of a separate issue, I think in addition to doing our students a disservice, we're very much doing ourselves a disservice. So those are vlogs.
Yeah, so those are the vlogs.
Just some of the vlogs.
That's some of the stuff that we'll be talking about during the vlogs.
And so if I could, I'm just going to throw this out. So for the people who are very literal, right? If you could explain, why is a multicultural center doing a vlog? Why is a multicultural center doing a podcast? We have some folks who are very, very literal and very much have a narrow definition of what a multicultural center is. So if you could explain, why are we doing this?
Yeah. So why a vlog? Why a podcast? I guess what I take from that question is like, why are we doing like technology type of media type of stuff through a multicultural center? Yeah. And in essence, it's just that we're just using a medium to essentially get out information. That's the only difference. It's still the same information that we present at the center, that we talk about in our meetings, that we do when we're facilitating workshops or trainings, or when we, bring out speakers. It's the same information. It's just through a different medium. And so, like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, we're able to reach a lot more students, a lot more faculty, staff, even our community members, through like a podcast, through a vlog, because it's online content. And so we could keep it online, you know, and folks can access it whenever they have time or availability. Whereas a workshop or a training, like it's a specific time, a specific date on campus. Not everyone has a schedule that is flexible enough that they could attend everything. That's how I take it. It's just a medium.
And so one of the things I'll even just kind of throw out like along those lines is someone who takes public transportation, used to take it exclusively to and from work, and would have like an hour and a half commute going back and forth to work at one point. I thought about how much time I actually spent on my phone listening to TED Talks, listening to podcasts, watching like interviews and things on YouTube. And it really there was a light that clicked. I spend so much time on my phone or listening to music, but just like consuming information. How do we increase our ability to provide information that could be consumed, right? As opposed to, waiting for folks to come here. How can we provide that for folks when they're coming and going about their day? That student who has an hour and a half, commute from Vancouver to PCC Cascade, is there a way that we can keep that student connected to?
So
we've been talking way too long.
No, actually, I think we're pretty good on time, but I think it was an important conversation to have, especially right off the bat, as to who we are, what we do, why are we here. And you'll notice that will be a theme that we ask of folks that we bring onto the show as guests. We'll be asking them like those types of questions that we essentially answered ourselves today. And
that's just, and I also think it's important to know that's a part. Like we do a lot more than that. This is kind of like the 30,000 foot overview.
Right, exactly.
Quick, brief,
So we'll be having a lot of services and a lot of programs coming up this term, as well as winter and spring term. We tend to plan out our, essentially year-long calendar ahead of time. But we'll reveal what it is that we're doing as we go along, and being able to guide folks or let folks know about what's coming up next.
Cool. So before we get out of here, I just kind of want to do replugs for two of our events. So we've got the Neighbor to Neighbor Fair. It's going to be Wednesday, October the 5th. It'll be in the Quad. So between the Student Union and the Cascade Hall building. So kind of that courtyard area. That'll be from 11 to 2 p.m. It's a community resource and engagement fair. This is also going to be going on during the same time as the ASPCC $1 barbecue. That is right. It is hamburgers, hot dogs, chips, and a bunch of other stuff. I think a drink and a cookie, all for $1. That is right.
Right.
$1. Get there early because that line
goes around the block.
That line goes to Interstate. So that's the one thing I want to plug. Other thing I want to plug is lemonade. The lemonade stand is going to be in that same area outside of the Student Union in the courtyard. That will be October 5th and October 6th from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. It'll be hosted and brought to you by the Cascade Multicultural Center, our equity and diversity advocates. Before we get out of here, Elizabeth, if you could tell the good people how they can connect to our podcast.
Yeah, good question.
Yes.
So how do you connect to our podcast? So it's actually, we're going to be putting it up on iTunes and then also on our Cascade Multicultural Center YouTube page. And essentially I'm going to be sending out an email with the links directly to those two sources.
Another program that we have, I just want to do a real plug for this real quick. The Cascade Multicultural Center is actually partnering with the Campus Compact of Oregon and Roosevelt High School. We have a new program called the Equity and Empowerment Core Mentorship Program. It is being coordinated by our newest employee, which is Alexander McPherson. That program is actually a mentoring program. We're going to have PCC students going to Roosevelt High School to mentor students at Roosevelt. We are doing a push right now to recruit for mentors. So if you have any students out there who you think would be good mentors, have excelled academically, have a lot to offer, definitely send them up to the Multicultural Center. It's Cascade Student Union, room 302. We are recruiting for mentors right now. So if you've got some folks in mind, definitely send them our way. Oh, yes. But we don't pay.
So thank you for listening. This is our first episode for Colonized Minds podcast. Up next, we'll be releasing another podcast this Thursday.
Do we want to tell them who? No, we're not going to tell them. We'll make it a surprise.
All right, it'll be a surprise, but it's a good one.
Yes.
So I definitely encourage y'all to listen to that second podcast on Thursday.
Got you. And maybe at some point we'll tell them where Colonized Minds comes from.
Right. We actually do need to have that conversation as well.
We should tell people where it comes from at some point.
Folks are probably like, Colonized Minds, why?
Oh, but that's a dope name. Colonized Minds podcast. Yeah. So this is Luke Givens.
And Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
Saying, so what if it's true?